And joining us now for a reaction to the latest from the White House and Capitol Hill, Vermont Independent Senator and Budget Committee Chairman Bernie Sanders. Senator, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for being with us. I want to start with infrastructure. You've been clear that any bipartisan package on physical infrastructure is also to be accompanied by a larger, more progressive, much more expensive bill. A bill that could potentially pass, of course, only with Democrat support through reconciliation. Do you think the more moderate members in your caucus are going to go for that two-step approach?
I do, and I'll tell you why, Andrea. I think every member of the caucus and almost all Americans understand that today we are living in a society where the very, very rich are getting phenomenally richer. Jeff Bezos is worth $200 billion, one person. Meanwhile, the working class of this country is struggling. You got 600,000 people who are homeless. You got parents who cannot afford childcare. And on top of all of that, we have to deal with the climate crisis, which I think every scientist is telling us is going to be devastating for this country and the entire planet. And we got to invest in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to sustainable energy and energy efficiency. So we have an enormous amount of work to be done. And at a time when the very rich and large corporations are often not paying anything or very little in taxes, they're going to have to pay their fair share so that we can protect working families in this country and deal with climate change.
Can we do it without a gas tax, a fossil fuel tax, which the White House has ruled out? Okay. How do you do it? Is it just through changes in the tax law? And how do you do the changes in the tax law and bring the moderates along in order to,
look, everybody, if there's anybody in America who thinks that it's a good idea that literally multi-billionaires in a given year do not pay a nickel in federal income tax, I'd like to hear from them. Or they think it's okay that large, profitable corporations making billions of dollars a year in profit don't pay anything in taxes. So I think what we need is a progressive tax system that says to the wealthy and large corporations, you're going to pay their fair share. Then we're going to invest in our roads and bridges. We're going to invest in transforming our energy system. We're going to invest, for example, in expanding Medicare. Right now, unbelievably, you got Medicare not covering dental care, vision, hearing aids, and we've got to do that as well. So all that I'm saying, and I think the American people agree, after years and years of worrying about billionaires and the rich, now it's time to have a budget that speaks to the needs of working families and the climate crisis that we face. That's what I'm trying to do.
I want to ask you about voting rights. We've seen advocates like Stacey Abrams, former President Obama, open to compromises on issues like the voter ID and purging voters. Is it time to do something smaller? And is there any way to get past the ironclad 50-vote Republican objection after Mitch McConnell's personal appeal to them?
Well, Andrea, I think Chuck Schumer made a good point yesterday in his remarks, and that is it really is disgraceful. I don't mean to be overly partisan, but it really is disgraceful that we did not have one Republican vote in helping us deal with the reality that in states all over this country, there is a concerted effort to deny African Americans, low-income people, young people, the right to vote. It's going on all over this country. That is not what America is supposed to be about. We can disagree on education, on health care, on any other damn thing you want to disagree with. But you cannot disagree about whether or not all Americans have the right to vote, and that right is being taken away from them. That's what we're trying to deal with right now. We could not have one Republican vote. So to answer your question, in my view, should we end the filibuster on this issue? Absolutely. This is an enormously important issue. Democracy is at stake. Remember, we're dealing with a party where many of the leaders still are claiming in the most fraudulent manner that Donald Trump won the election. I mean, that's the kind of outrageous activity we're dealing with. We got to stand up to that.
What do you do about the objection to ending the filibuster from both Senators Manchin and Sinema? How do you even get your Democrats?
Andrea, I'm tired of talking about Mr. Manchin and Miss Sinema. You know, we have got to do what we can to bring people together. The American people, I think all over this country, understand that now is the time to act. And I will also tell you, clearly we are constrained by the fact that we only have 50 Democrats. And to my mind, what this next election is going to be about is whether the American people want us to have a government that represents all people, that believes in democracy or not. And we need a hell of a lot more Democrats in the Senate than we have right now.
I want to ask you about another aspect of this. People have focused a lot on access to voting, but isn't an even more important issue nullification of voting? The aspects of the bill, of the local bills, state bills that have been pursued by Republican legislatures that actually take the rights away from state elected voting experts, including some Republicans, Arizona, Georgia, and gives it to carefully selected partisans who know nothing about the law and are going to nullify voting.
And gives power to the legislature. We can see, I mean, the writing is on the wall. We're seeing, what how the Trump people behaved after the presidential election. I can see a situation where in a given state, somebody says, you know what, I have a problem. I have a real problem. I don't have any evidence, but I got a problem with the votes that came in this county. And we're going to take away the responsibility of determine whether the results in that election were legal or not. We're going to transfer it to the legislature. Oh, and by the way, the Republican legislature votes to say that that count was not proper. That's what we're looking at. Taking away the power of local elected officials who have historically had that power, have done a good job in that respect, and giving it to partisan legislatures.
So is there a compromise, a bipartisan compromise? You can't use reconciliation for this. Is there a bipartisan compromise that might be okay with you, or does it just have to be a filibuster?
There's no bipartisan. Look, you tell me.
Okay.
If you know of any Republican who's prepared to vote to support democracy and voting rights, I would love to see them. There aren't any. That's the sad reality. Remember, you have a former president who goes around the country today saying that he really won the election by a landslide. You have candidates running all over the country who are touting that absurd position. And you do not have one Republican in the United States Senate who is prepared to vote to preserve American democracy and prevent these states from doing the terrible, undemocratic things that they are doing. So, no, this is not going to be, unfortunately, and I say this with great sadness, this is not going to be bipartisan. Unfortunately, Democrats are going to have to do it by themselves.
Can you get the White House to go along?
I believe that the White House is deeply concerned about this issue and will do the right thing.
I want to ask you about gun violence and some of the proposals coming. As you know, Joe Biden was criticized during the primary for some of the things that happened in the 94 bill. Are we at a point where there is some kind of gun reform, gun control, whatever you want to call it, that can get through the Senate?
Well, once again, I think the question is whether Republicans who are intimidated by Donald Trump, who are becoming a more and more frightened authoritarian party, have the courage to stand up to the NRA and other gun lobby organizations. But your point, I think, as I understand what you're saying, is there is a growing consensus, not radical, that people who have criminal backgrounds, people who have histories of violence should not own guns. We need thorough and strong gun background checks. We need to do away with the so-called gun show loophole, the straw man provision. There are things that the overwhelming majority of the American people, including gun owners, agree with. The question is whether the Republicans in the Congress have the courage to support those provisions.
And before I let you go, Senator, I do want to ask you something coming from our Hill team about a cap on state and local tax deductions that have to go through your committee. Of course, would you support that?
Well, what I would support is the understanding that there are middle-class families in states where property taxes are very high that are paying a whole lot in state and local taxes. And I think we have to support them. On the other hand, if you got some billionaires who own a massive mansion, should they be able to write off their state and local taxes? The answer is no, they should not. So I think we ought to work out a system which protects the middle class, but makes it clear that very wealthy will pay their fair share.
Our thanks to you, Senator Bernie Sanders, the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee. Thanks very much, sir.